In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make 3 types of lidded jars. Now obviously there are a lot more than 3 types of lids out there, but in my opinion these 3 are the most common, and by learning them you can figure the other ones out too. So let me show you what they are and how to make them. So like all good art, we're going to start with a sketch. Here are our jars and their various lids. The first type of lid is a lid with a flange. This type of lid has a wall that fits down into the side of the pot and usually keeps it from tipping over. The second type of lid is called a gallery lid. This lid has a ledge that it sits on at the top of the pot. The last type of lid is what I call a cap lid, and this usually sits over the top of the pot and blends into the body of the pot. Now that we have our shapes, let's jump into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is weigh out my clay. These aren't going to be the exact same shape, so the exact weight doesn't matter entirely, but I do want them to be about the same size. So we're going to shoot for about a pound, give or take. I'll leave an extra bigger ball of clay for the lids. Once we've weighed everything out, we're going to wedge out our clay. Now wedging does a couple things. It removes all of the air bubbles from your clay, but it also aligns all the particles, making it easier to center later on. Next, I'll forcefully throw my clay onto the middle of the wheel and center it to get it ready for the first pull. When making the body of the jars, the steps are pretty much the same. You center your clay, you make a well, you open up the bottom, and then using my sponge, I'm going to pinch the walls up, which is called pulling. After I do my initial pull, I'll use my fingers to pull the rest of the clay up into a cylinder shape. Once I've reached the height that I want, I'll get my metal rib out and I'll begin to shape the clay to the form that I'm desiring. For this jar, we're making a gallery lid, so I want to leave a little bit more clay at the top. You'll see me compress the rim there at the top with my fingers. Once you're ready to make the gallery, take something with a straight edge. You'll see here I'm just using a paint scraper. And then what you want to do is press into the edge of your rim, making a right-angled edge. It needs to at least have 90 degrees or more in order for your lid to have enough clearance when coming in and out of the ledge. So we'll just adjust here to make sure that I have enough space for my lid to go in and out. When that's done, take your calipers and measure the distance. You want to make sure that you're measuring from edge to edge, and you want to make sure that you're measuring right away. If you do this afterwards, your clay will have shrunk. Once you do that, clean up the bottom and cut it off. Set it aside and move on to the next one. The process for this is the same. We're going to open the bottom up, pull up the walls, create a cylinder, and begin to shape it using our metal rib. This jar will have the flange lid on it, so I won't have to do anything to the rim in order to prepare it for the lid. Once we're ready, we'll take the measurements for the inside edge of the rim, then we'll cut it off and put it aside. For the last jar, this one is the cap lid, and the process in the beginning is the same as all the other ones. Shaping, pulling, everything's the same. When we get to the part where we're going to prepare for the lid, take that same right angle tool, it can be whatever you want, and press into the side. Now you want to be careful here because if your tool is not wet, the friction of it can catch on the edge and it will tear that lip off. Once you've made the indent, use your calipers to take the measurement on the outside edge of the rim. Cut it off and put it aside. Now, we're going to start making the lids for these, and typically you want to make these the same day if you can because you want them to dry together. We're going to make these all out of one lump of clay. So the first lid we're going to make is the gallery lid, and to do this, we're going to section off a chunk of clay, and then we're going to press down on the top, revealing a small little ball, and you're going to shape that into a knob. For this one, I made a really simple knob, but you can make it as complicated as you want. Next, pinch the edges of that disc that you made so that it comes out nice and flat, and then you want to give it a slight dome. This is probably one of the easiest lids to make. Once your lid is wide enough, take your calipers and make a mark where you took the measurement. Then, using your needle tool, poke a hole right down through that line until it goes all the way through, and you cut off the excess. Then measure again to make sure it's right and cut it off and set it aside. Your lid's pretty well done. For the next lid, we're going to be making a flange lid. To make this lid, make a small bowl and make sure that you don't press down too deep. If you press down too deep, your lid will be too tall. I've learned that the hard way. Then press this open until it reaches about the width of your calipers. Keep going until you reach that mark. It's really important. Next, take your right angle. Again, you can see that I'm using a paint scraper here, and press back in. That wall that you press back in is going to end up being your flange. You can take that flange wall and pull it so that it is not so thick and so that it is a little bit taller inside your pot. Take your measurements again and keep tweaking and adjusting this until it matches. It's so important that it matches up because there's not a lot of room for error later. Cut this off using whatever method you decide, but make sure that you have enough clay at the bottom that you don't cut your lid off. The last lid that we're going to make is the cap lid. And this is probably one of the easier lids to make. You just got to make sure that you leave enough clay at the bottom so that you can trim it out later. One of the rules of thumb when making this lid is you probably want to leave your walls a little bit thicker, and you probably can leave them a little bit more narrow. You can trim this one out after it gets leather hard, so there's some forgiveness there. So it's been a day and all of these are leather hard and ready to trim now. So we're going to cut them off and put them over on the wheel and trim them. So first we're going to trim the base, and to do this we're just going to trim it the way you normally would. Center it on the wheel, press it down with some clay, and clean up the edges just like so. Making sure you give yourself a foot ring and you're removing the excess clay. Once we've trimmed the body of the jar, the next thing to do is to trim the lids. And the first lid that we're going to trim is going to be the lid with the flange. Now, the tighter that this fits together, the easier this is because there won't be as much wiggle room. For this, we're just going to trim off the excess clay at the top, and we're going to score and slip a little bit of clay on the top to throw a knob. You can shape this however you want. I shaped a pretty simple one here. If you had more clay, you could trim this into your lid, but I didn't. And there you have it. That jar and lid is done. The next jar that we're going to trim is the one with the gallery lid. And for this, we're just going to take the top and we're going to cut most of that off with a knife. Then we'll fit it down into the gallery again and take our trimming tool to trim off any excess clay that is on the lid. Like I said, this lid is pretty simple, so after this stage, you're pretty well done. We'll see if it fits, and it does. The last lid is the cap lid, and for this lid, I'm actually going to trim it to fit. So it's really important that you keep this lid and the body at the same consistency. And you want them both to be fairly leather hard, because if they're soft at all, this lid will warp and then it won't fit onto your pot the way you want it to. So I'm just going to shave it off until it matches up perfectly. And then I will turn it over and shave the side off to make the body and the lid look as though they are one piece. Then I'll clean up the top, and this is where all that extra clay that I left in the top comes in handy. It gives me a lot of freedom to kind of shape the top as I want. And there you have it. Those are your 3 basic types of lids. If you learn how to make these 3 different types of lids, you'll be well on your way to making pretty much all the other ones. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know. Put them in the comments and I will get to them as soon as I can. Keep at it, never stop growing, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.